Saw this woman at the park talking to her dog today, and I thought, what, how silly was that? So I went home and told my cat about it, and I laughed, my cat laughed, Siri laughed. All right,
Everybody laughed.
everybody laughed. Yeah, the vacuum laughed, the refrigerator laughed. Um, yeah, that was a anyway. This is the real story with Adam and Sherry. I'm Adam Hamalian,
I'm Sherry Hutchens.
and this is where two broker associates talk about all things real estate and maybe tell stupid dad jokes. All right, let's hear about it.
All right, Adam, maybe I should take over.
Maybe you should. Yeah.
What's going on in the market this week?
Well, the market is, we've been begging for inventory for a long time. And
Yes.
under the category of be careful what you wish for, we've gotten a ton of inventory.
Yes, we do.
One of the places where we have a couple listings currently is Rossmoor, and there are just under 100 homes for sale in Rossmoor, and we've been averaging over the last few years just 60. 100 is a far cry from the high. We used to average 100 to 150 all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're creeping back in there, but it changes the market quite a bit. And yeah,
What
just
do
in
you think that's
general.
all about? I mean, 100 homes in Rossmoor is a lot.
Yeah, well, Rossmore's pretty specific though, isn't it? Right? You've got
Yeah.
it's one of the few places where you have a more defined lifespan. That may be not the right term, but
Hmm.
people move in at a certain age, and
Hmm.
then their tenure there is not as long as it might be
Hmm.
in other places. So there's just a regular turnover of properties, and
Hmm.
there's been a slowdown in buyers in Rossmoor, and not keeping up with the ones that are for sale. It's got a little bit to do with the insurance issue, which is
Yep.
affecting all of California, but there's some very specific things at Rossmoor. People have probably heard us talk about that.
Do you think the tariffs are having an effect out there? I mean, everybody there pretty much is on a fixed income at this point, I would think.
Yeah, I think it is. And it's interesting you see that because so in Rossmoor the price range is from 200,000 to over 2 million. And the homes that the inventory where it's growing the most and has the most sluggish sales are under 500,000.
Yeah.
And at that price point here in the Bay Area, that is, at the low end. And those buyers are, if they have the capacity to do more, they're buying something that's higher or maybe someplace else, or they're staying where they're at. But the people that
Yeah.
are the prime buyer category there, does have a smaller set of assets and income. And so, yeah, it's definitely affecting where they're. And if you add into that the increased insurance costs in Rossmoor, so not just the tariffs and how the global market is happening,
Hmm.
but um, those monthly dues going up means the monthly housing expense, it goes up, just without the purchase price. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, the market buyers hate uncertainty in the market, especially if you're on a fixed income. I can imagine that, trying to figure out what you're going to do if you're going to sell your big house outside of Rossmoor and invest in a $500,000 home in the rest of the country. That's a lot of house. In Rossmoor, it's, if you're lucky, a two-bedroom, one bath condo, maybe a co-op. Um, and then on top of that, you've got about $1,200 HOA dues every month. And that HOA dues covers a lot. Don't get me wrong. There's a long list of things that you benefit from with that dues, but still, that's a big outlay every month. So we need some certainty in our market. We need some stability instead of these ups and downs. And today we're having tariffs, and tomorrow we're not having tariffs, and things like that.
Well, I think, and that's part of it is if you have a set portfolio, in savings or whatever else, people are not inclined to make any changes, even if they had enough money to do it. They're
Yeah,
they don't have 20 years to make up the lost income if they liquidate at the wrong time. So
absolutely.
everybody's just, it's not just business, but on the micro or individual level, it definitely still it's making a big impact.
Well,
What
and
about what
outside of
about
the,
outside? I was going to ask you that. What about
Mhm.
outside of Rossmore? What do you
Yeah,
see, more in the general public?
we've got more inventory than we've had in 5 years. We had lots of inventory during the pandemic, 2021. We probably had record inventory, record sales, and then it dropped off because the rates started to go up in March of 2022. And everybody backed off and thought, oh, maybe this is temporary and it won't be 7% forever and it'll come back to 3%. Well, it's probably not ever going back to 3%. And everybody who had a 3% mortgage thought, I'm staying put. I'm not going to move and buy another house where I would have to pay more. But all of a sudden this year that has loosened up and we've got a glut of inventory and we've got a lot of nervous buyers for all kinds of reasons out there. And some houses are selling. I think the last two that we've written on in the last week for our own buyers have been multiple offers and have gone over, and we didn't get either one of them. And so that certainly is at odds with the belief that we've got a lot of inventory, rates are high, buyers are sitting on the sidelines waiting for rates to come down, and sellers are unwilling to drop their price. It's just not true for everybody, as we found out when we were
Yeah.
writing offers last week. And one of them was in, what was that, 1.75?
Yeah.
And it went or 1.739. That's a lot of house. And it went over. Our
Yeah.
client did not get it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I think that every story is unique and it's hard to, push that out on the whole market. But yeah,
mm,
we definitely buyers out there still looking. But
yeah.
as a whole, I think there's fewer buyers and they're all looking at the same houses, I think. I think
Mhm.
we're seeing days on market increase. We're starting to
Mhm.
see price drops being not super common, but more common than it has been.
Yeah.
And I think that's as the market softens, it's just that much more challenge to price a house right.
Mhm.
So we've normally been pricing houses a little bit below its market value and allowing the buyer pool to bid it up a little bit, not dramatically so, but just
Mhm.
a little bit extra. You think,
Yeah.
do you think there'll be a time again when we might overlist a house and knowing that we're going to have to take less than the list price? Do you think we'll say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is the most we think you'll get for it, and you should be prepared to take an under ask offer? Or do you think that strategy is not live in the Bay Area?
I have never worked in a market since 2001 where that's been the case.
Yeah.
I think in the rest of the country that is common. This is what we think it should sell for, and then it oftentimes sells for a little less. It depends on where you are, of course, but I've never worked in that market. It's always been, either set the price and let the buyers take it to where it's supposed to sell, or during the recession, price it and hope that you get an offer on it and that the bank approves the short sale.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
very vast extremes. Pricing is difficult and it varies in our own market. The way we price a house in Walnut Creek is different than the way we price a house when we worked over in Rockridge in Oakland a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very complicated. It's no wonder that the consumers have a hard time wondering how we do what we do and why we do what we do.
Yeah.
It's a
There,
lot of factors.
there's a standard form that we have all our clients sign, and it's the market conditions advisory. And I kind of
Mhm.
feel like it's a little bit of a joke form, but it actually is really important because it basically says the market conditions have a great effect on everything from strategy
Yeah.
about listing and writing an offer and multiple offers and counter offers. And the form uses a bunch of real estate language to try and explain it to potential sellers and potential buyers. But
Yeah.
really, you need an agent to help explain it to you. And really, by the time we get to that form, we have given them 3 or 4 times the amount of information that that form holds.
Yes.
Um, but it's important because sometimes people don't hear when we're talking and they can take all those documents home and review them and digest them and ask their questions before they sign them. That
A
actually
little
oh,
A
go
little
ahead.
history on that form, just so you know. That form didn't exist until either middle of recession or after the recession. When the market started to slow down in 2006 and then really slow down in 2007 before it crashed in September of 2008, buyers had been throwing money at houses like crazy leading up to 2005. And we were having the same conditions we had during the pandemic, where massive overbids, non-contingent offers, and just do your very best to get the house you want. And the first fallout from that was people started suing appraisers, and they were suing appraisers because they said they overvalued the house. And then they started suing agents, and then they started suing everybody, saying, "You talked me into buying this house. I would have never paid this much for this house if the agent hadn't told me that's what it was going to take, and if the appraiser hadn't appraised it." So that, I mean, that's kind of an oversimplification of the way that played out. But the result of that was that market conditions advisory that says, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, whatever price you choose it because you chose it. Nobody told you. The seller didn't tell you you have to pay that. If you elect to have a non-contingent offer, that is your decision. The seller did not tell you you had to have a non-contingent offer, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That is where that all came from.
I, I,
That was an ugly time.
yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like that it's confusing because on one hand, like you said, the seller isn't forcing the buyer to write in any particular offer, but it also takes an agreement, right? So the buyer says, well, he wouldn't accept my $1 offer for his 1 million house. He made me
Uh,
pay $1 million for it. It's like,
yeah,
okay, you're missing the point. It's that
yeah,
no one had said you had to buy the house. The
yeah,
seller wasn't interested in selling it for less than 1 million. And if you wanted it, you had to spend $1 million on it, but you didn't have to do it. And it's
yep,
up to you to determine that value.
yeah,
And I'm a little empathetic towards hey, the appraiser validated that offer price. Um, and now 3 years later, it's not worth that. It seems like the appraiser must have made a mistake. And the truth of the matter is the appraiser is representing what the market at that one moment
hmm,
is holding, and that they're looking at comparable sales and similar size, shape, same, on that same block and the same floor plan sold yesterday for 1 million, and you offered 1 million. So that must be what the market says
yeah,
it's worth that
yeah,
day.
yeah.
But the stock market crashes the next day, or we invade Poland, and the house value will go instantly down,
Yeah,
and the appraiser didn't make a mistake on the value, and yeah, so
not the appraiser's fault.
yeah,
It was different before the recession. You may know a little bit about this, considering your relationship to an appraiser, but um,
two appraisers.
two appraisers, that's right, daughter and wife. But I mean, pre-recession, I would, send a contract over to my lender and over to escrow, and the lender would pick up the phone and call their favorite appraiser and say, "I've got a job for you," sending it over. And I may have heard one say one time, "Please make this happen for me." And post-recession, after Dodd-Frank, and all the rules that were put in place around the whole industry as a result of the recession, there's an insulation in the form of an appraisal management company between the lender and between the appraiser. So there's nobody having a conversation about what can you do for me.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, there's definitely some more rules that have come into effect, and that was kind of actually our original topic for today, is to talk a little bit about the our industry organizations that oversee real estate as a whole.
yeah.
And so in the case of appraiser, there's an organization called the OREA, the Organization of Real Estate Appraisers.
Hmm.
And there's actually like language for them. They're not a government organization, but there's language for them because they are highly governed by Fannie Mae
Yeah.
and FHA as entities, and so they have to meet certain requirements, and
Yeah.
just like us, have to have their license renewed every couple of years, and
Yep.
they're trying to so strengthen that as a reliable market. But for real estate, there's been a lot of discussion over the last couple of years around the National Association of Realtors,
Mhm.
or NAR or NAR, not to be
Yep.
confused with NRA. That's completely different. But just shooting from the hip here. Sorry, dad joke. Okay. And we belong to a couple other organizations that are subsets of that. So
Yes.
our entry point into that National Association of Realtors is our local MLS,
Hmm.
our local, actually, I should say, our local Contra Costa Association of Realtors
Hmm.
organization, which has an MLS.
Hmm.
And then we automatically then are members of California Association of Realtors, and also automatically members of NAR. And it is the members of NAR who get to call themselves realtors,
Hmm.
as opposed to real estate agents. Uh,
Uh,
kind of making fun of that, but
uh-huh. So pretend I'm a 5-year-old and explain NAR and CAR to me.
okay. So the local, let me jump all the way down to the bottom because that's the
Okay.
people we know the best.
Okay.
So in our local Contra Costa County, there's Association of Realtors,
Mhm.
and one of the main things that does is has the multiple listing service where we input our listings so that all the other brokers that are members of our local MLS get that information and can share it with their clients.
Mhm.
Simultaneously, that also gets pushed out to places like Redfin and Realtor.com and Zillow so that consumers can get those also.
So
And
that's called a syndication or an
yeah,
IDX feed.
yeah, yeah. And then that is under, and there's some committees that do things like govern ethics and rules of fair play,
Mhm.
and particularly something that we're going to talk a little bit about, or we talked about a couple weeks ago, called clear cooperation, gets
Yep.
implemented at the local level.
Yep.
And then CAR, California Associated Realtors, is one of the best organizations for realtors in the country. It is leading on the leading edge of all sorts of different topics, and you can guess, why that might be. We have the most populous state. We have the most amount of homes here,
Mhm.
and so in order to kind of be, govern the freeway, so to speak, they help establish policies and rules, and then probably most importantly, forms
Mhm.
that we all, as realtors, use to work with buyers and sellers,
Yes.
and. And so the lawyers at California Association of Realtors, they don't represent real estate agents. They represent buyers and sellers.
Mhm.
That it's for them, it's most important that the contracts read clearly so that everybody understands what they're doing, and there's
Mhm.
not a bias for a buyer or seller because at any given moment, they're basically representing both a buyer and a seller in their forms.
Mhm. Yep.
And and you want to talk about NAR from there? You want to step up?
No, go ahead. I was going to ask you a question about forms, but I'll bring that up later.
Okay, and so then so not every state has their own association of realtors. Some of the smaller states don't have them. They have some different forms.
Mhm.
But all realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors. And
Mhm.
that national organization plays a couple really important roles. One is they are a lobby in Congress for things like homeowner rights and tenant rights. And right now, there's a big effort to try and increase the standard deduction for your tax basis as an exemption for capital gains when you sell your house. It hasn't changed in, I think, like 30 years.
Yeah.
Surprise, home values have gone up in 30 years.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to lobby to have those numbers increase from 250,000 in capital gains exemption. I'm not sure where it's going to end up, but
So from 250,000 per individual, 500,000 for a couple, up
that's right.
to 1 million for
Yeah.
a couple,
Yeah.
which doesn't mean anything in the middle of the country. It only means something on the coasts
Yeah.
where values are high. I mean, just that in Walnut Creek, where you and I live and where we sell most of our homes, I mean, the average sales price of a single family home is like 1.3 or 1.4.
Yeah.
So it's not like that, obviously, in the rest of the country. But on the coasts,
Yeah.
it can be, which is why we need the higher exemption. And I think there's been problems in Congress with a lot of officials saying, why do we need to increase it? We need
Yeah.
it because people are living in homes that they no longer that it's not that they can't afford them, it's that they can't afford to sell because they don't have the exemption and they would pay so much of their really retirement money into taxes when if there was a big enough exemption they could sell and make room for people to buy homes because we have and help with the housing shortage. That
Well,
wasn't fair.
I use my mom as an example. So my
Yes.
parents bought the house that I grew up in after 10. We moved there when I was 10
Hmm.
for I think like 107,000. And this is like 77-ish.
That was a lot of money in
It
77.
was a lot of money.
Yeah.
They got a little bit of loan from my grandparents and they pinched and scraped. And I think that my dad had a side gig to his main
Hmm.
job so that they
Yeah.
could do that. Um, and then my that was my mom's house, and her she moved did it the last couple of years moved to assisted living, but she couldn't really sell that house because it was worth about 1.5 when she passed away, which meant that she had 104 or a million 1.4 million dollars in capital gains, and because she had been in the house for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
And so I know no one's crying for my mom's house and that
But
amount of
still,
money,
this is an example
but
of,
but as an example of the capital gains that she had, that she part of the reason why she didn't sell it when she moved to assisted living, because she that was going to be a lot of capital gains tax to pay, and so we waited until she passed away, and then we sold it. And just think that that house, so it was a rental, somebody was living in it. It wasn't like it was sitting vacant.
yeah,
But imagine if there's a buyer who was hungry to buy a house, we could have sold that. It could have been available to a home buyer
yeah,
instead of a renter. We need rentals too. I'm just using it as an example of why increasing that capital gains exemption might make a difference for housing turnover, because then you don't get people who are in a house, a single woman in a four-bedroom house by herself for, the last 10 or 15 years. There was a lot of house for her to have.
yeah.
And
It contributes directly to our housing shortage.
yeah,
And there's bitterness among the young home buyers about older people staying in houses too long. They're not staying there because they want to live there. It's too much house for most of them. Many, if they're living in a two-story and they can't go up and down the stairs, that is not the best deal for them, but they need a bigger tax exemption
yeah,
so that they can sell and move on and make that house available to someone else and live in a smaller home or go to Rossmoor or something.
yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things that NAR is doing. We kind of got
Yeah,
sidetracked here.
we did. Yes.
You were going to ask me something about forms. Do you remember what that was?
Yes. I mean, I always see when I'm looking, not always, occasionally when I'm looking at the MLS and looking at offer instructions for getting ready to write an offer on behalf of a client, an agent will say, must use CAR forms. And I've never seen an offer come in on anything but a CAR form. However, San Francisco has their own forms. They don't use all, they must use some CAR forms. We should know we sold a house there just a couple of years ago, but they have their own purchase agreement. And I wonder how that works. Do you have any idea?
Well, sure. So those contracts, so we as real estate agents are not allowed to write contracts. We're not
Right,
lawyers, right? And
right.
it's, that only lawyers can write contracts, and you can buy and sell a house in California, by on a piece of paper. I agree to pay you this much for this house,
Hmm.
and that could be a binding contract.
Hmm.
The reason why we typically don't do something as simple as that is because there's a whole lot more at risk. In the CAR forms, for instance, there's escrow instructions for the escrow holder. There's things like contingency removal. There's all sorts of things that make the contract be more weighty and provide some equity to both sides and clarity to both sides. Could a
Hmm.
lawyer write up a contract every time you wanted to do a purchase or a sale? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we are not lawyers. So what the CAR has done is it's provided these contracts that agents, real estate agents, if you have a license, are licensed to fill out the form. And basically we could put names and numbers. Is some room for us to write a few extra things in there, but all the lawyers cringe when real estate agents write in things like clauses,
That is correct.
famously things like the escalator clause that are not enforceable, but uh, agents try to give clarity, but we are not always great at that. So we typically write the names, write the property address. Here's the amount we're paying. This is how many days we want to till we close.
Yep.
We're filling it out, and then of course explaining it to our clients as best we can.
Yeah.
So can San Francisco have their own, like I said, that not every area has an association like Contra Costa County Association of Realtors. Well, San Francisco Association of Realtors develops their own forms that
Hmm.
they are allowed to use, and they're not required in San Francisco to use those forms, but they cover some of the laws and ordinances that are specific to San Francisco. Like, did you know that in San Francisco you're required to do a energy um, evaluation of the home and show what sort of past utility bills you've had. Now, I
Yep.
think that's a great idea. And that is
Yes.
in the municipal code, and that's one of the things that the San Francisco contract mentions, but it's not in the CAR form.
Right. It doesn't apply out here because we don't have the same laws. I mean, we found out I've only sold a few homes in San Francisco in my time as a agent. But I was surprised when we wrote an offer on this beautiful home, what, 2 years ago, three
Yep.
years ago, that their post 1989 earthquake, there were certain things that a house had to have done to it. The garage framing had to be retrofitted because during the 1989 earthquake down in the marina, some of the houses caved in because the garage framing,
Yep.
and I'm using the term loosely because I don't.
It went eek like a card house.
How do you do
Like
that again?
this.
Eek?
Yeah, yeah.
Did it go eek?
Eek. Eek. Eek.
Eek. Oh, eek.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what it
We
did.
should not report our podcast this late in the evening again because we are both a little loopy.
Eek. My garage went eek. Eek. We just had an earthquake.
If we don't cut
Anyway,
this out, my partner's going to start snorting any moment.
okay, back to NAR.
Boring subject. How can you laugh at that?
So I've always thought NAR was, the people who set the rules and the code of ethics, and we followed them and never really thought twice. Well, actually, I do think twice about them when I pay my dues every year to them. But they've become much more well known, not only to realtors but to the general public over the last couple of years.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things in the realtor community, so real estate agents by and large are self-employed. We're independent contractors with our
Hmm.
brokerages. There are some exceptions to that, but that's largely it. And as you might expect, the same kind of person who is an entrepreneur on their own. We're partners, but most are lone wolves. It's a unique American breed, I think, and
Hmm. Yep.
we as a general cross section of population don't like being told what to do and don't like overarching associations
Hmm.
because we want to do what we want to do. We want to be
Yep.
self-governing
Yep.
as individuals. And I'm empathetic to that. To be honest, that's part of the reason why I'm in real estate.
That's 100% of the reason why I'm in real estate.
Yeah. I mean, I work long hours, but I don't like being told to work long hours.
Exactly.
Some days I'd like to
Oh,
have a 9 to 5 where I could clock out at 5 and go home. And here we are at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, still recording our podcast because
exactly.
we want to get this information out. Um, but one of the things that comes along with that Lone Ranger mentality is a skepticism of the larger organizations. And I think that, and it's not surprising that most people are mostly loyal to their local realtor board, partly because they know the people that are running it. When they need something, that's who they're
Hmm.
calling. Say, I need help with my lockbox code. I
Hmm.
need help with my listing. And those are the people that we're directly interacting with and serve us most
Yeah.
closely. And then I think that in California, the California Association of Realtors is probably the strongest realtor association in the country,
Hmm.
better than the local MLS, better than I think NAR. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of appreciation. There's sometimes skepticism about some of the forms we have to use. And Sherry, every time we get a new form, why do we get a new form?
Because somebody sued somebody.
Because somebody sued somebody. And so the lawyers are just there trying to protect people from another future lawsuit.
Uh-huh.
So they're serving us even though we don't like that our purchase contract went from 3 pages on the back or on the back of a napkin to 17 pages plus about 35 extra documents.
Uh-huh. Yes, it's a lot of
Um,
paper. Thank goodness we all do digital nowadays.
Yeah, but then there's this big gap from there to NAR and a lot of skepticism. It's really at arm's length. We don't know anybody that works there. We only hear them when they're defending us in a lawsuit and
Hmm.
maybe setting rules that we don't get and we don't understand. And
Hmm.
so there's been a lot of shaking of the fist at NAR by real estate agents.
Yeah.
And I think one of our goals for tonight, for this week's podcast, is to maybe shed more positive light on NAR. I'm not saying that they're
Yeah.
perfect,
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, they have to represent agents in all 50 states, maybe
Yep.
even some of the territories. I'm not sure. And there's just a lot of different market spaces within that, and they have to
And
have
laws,
and
different
laws.
laws.
Yeah, laws in different states and how, like for instance, Utah is a non-disclosure state. That's very
Which,
different than California, where you better disclose that somebody sneezed there 4 weeks ago in case you get a delayed cold, right?
exactly.
You know what my
Don't
favorite
understand a non-disclosure state. That boggles the mind.
Yeah, you know what my favorite current mandatory disclosure is?
No, tell me.
Well, there's two things. One is embedded in a longer document. I'll come back to that, but it's
Okay.
the standalone document where we have to have people sign saying that they're required to have water saving fixtures in a house at the time of sale. So
Uh-huh.
it means all the shower heads, all the faucets, the toilets, everything has to have a water saving feature to it. And
Going back to 1992 or
uh,
four.
so all the sellers sign this document and all the buyers sign this document, and embedded in this document that says this is the way the law is, it basically says, and but we don't know anyone who's qualified to test it, and we're
Uh,
not going to test it.
yep.
And Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if you sometime in the future somebody may figure out how to enforce this law, but for now, you're just signing a paper that you know that even though the law says it has to be that way, there's no one to validate that it's been done.
Yes.
I love that one.
Yeah, it's fun to explain and watch the clients go, "You're having me sign something that says that I have to do it, but there's nobody to enforce it." Yep, that's
Yeah.
that's exactly what we mean.
And the other one I love is embedded in this long document that has all these different conditions that might be important for a buyer to know. And embedded in one of them, it says a golf course disclosure that if you are buying a house near a golf course, golf balls may enter your backyard. I feel like that's the Adam Hamalian clause right there. Adam Hamalian plays this course, therefore, you may get one of his balls in your backyard. Just saying, I'm
Oh my.
I'm disclosure famous.
Yes, yes.
That's right. In fact, I think from now on, I'm going to go into that section on all the forms and I'm going to write my name next to it before we have our clients sign it. It's like an autograph. I've just increased its value, don't you think?
Yes, I do.
It's like,
I'm
what can
thinking
I?
about a client who lived in Walnut Creek and he was a dentist, I think, and they decided to move out to Brentwood, I think into Somerset, which is maybe a golf community. I wasn't the agent. It happened to someone in my office when I was early in my career. And they were sitting on their patio one night and she got hit by a golf ball.
Oh no.
And so much for disclosure. She was injured quite badly. It hit her in the eye and broke her.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. I know that you didn't hit that ball, but yeah, so much for a golf ball disclosure.
I'm no longer putting my name on the golf ball.
Good idea.
Um, well, we sold a house last year on a golf course,
Which one?
Cherry Hills.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
We were on the
Yeah,
seventh hole.
I think so.
There was a couple golf balls in the backyard too when we first started cleaning up the property.
Yes, we did.
How
There
did we
was.
get off on this topic? What were we talking about? Oh yeah.
We were talking about NAR
Oh yeah.
and how great CAR is.
Yeah, agents shaking their fists at NAR. So,
Yeah,
but like the way that OREA has strengthened the appraisal community by setting up some more strict guidelines, and of course, some of that came from the Dodd-Frank Act and a few other things like that that
yeah,
help make appraisers have more integrity, or the appraisal at the end having more integrity.
yeah,
Uh, the same thing as NAR does for agents, that they help set the rules of the road that are the most general, that there's a ethics that we have to abide by, and then sometimes there's things like lawsuits and best practices.
yeah.
And currently, the thing that's up for discussion, we touched on a couple weeks ago, called clear cooperation.
Yes.
And the thing that gets me about so clear cooperation, do you want to explain it or you want me to?
Go ahead.
All right. Clear cooperation is a policy that it's designed so that brokers don't keep listings just to sell to double end a transaction,
Yeah.
and that makes sure that all the listings are available to all the buyers that are out there.
So
Uh,
explain double end.
so double end is when when a broker and their agent work for both the buyer and the seller at the same
Yes.
time. Typically,
Yes.
it's the same agent doing both sides of the transaction.
Which is called a
And
single agent double end, just to confuse it.
exactly.
Single agent dual agency.
Yeah. And if you go back a couple of weeks ago, we did one just all on the clear cooperation. We could talk about why that's ethically fraught. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily automatically unethical. It just makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
Um, and so the National Association of Realtors has tried to set up some guidelines to maintain and support best practices for consumers.
Hmm.
And sometimes it seems like it might try to play a hand its role in how brokers work with each other, but really it's for the client, the best result for the client. And this is where a lot of agents are just frustrated and they shake their fist at NAR. Why are they telling us
Yeah.
who we can list our properties with and not? And and I think that there's a couple things that I think they're failing to see. They're failing to see how double ending a transaction or doing what's called a pocket listing where you don't share it broadly
Hmm.
is not beneficial to sellers and not beneficial to buyers. And that's who we're supposed to be serving. And
Yeah.
not only, it primarily seems to benefit the agent who's double ending it. Now, it may be that the seller has a reason to not broadcast it. Maybe there's some privacy. Maybe there's a domestic issue that needs to be held tightly. So I don't, this is the problem is that there's not a one rule works for everybody.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing about it that is challenging is that the agents, no, I forgot my second point. The agents think it's about them, but it's really about the buyer. I guess I said that. What was my other point? Do you remember?
Oh no, I've snorted twice in the same podcast.
We're gonna have like a little counting over here in the corner, like one, two,
Yeah,
three.
we
So
can add that.
if we keep going to 9 o'clock, I better get another snort out of you.
So a couple of years ago, I was showing houses. This was before we were partners, and I walked into the house on a Sunday, and there was a gentleman who turned out to be the seller sitting in a wheelchair. He was obviously very, very sick, and he could not leave the house so that the house could be held open. But somewhere, somehow, somebody had decided that the best practice was to put this house on the market instead of selling it off the market. And I felt so sorry for him in his condition to have all these people traipsing through the house and staring at him and wondering what was going on. And um, so, was it really the best thing for that man to have his house sold that way? Sometimes the people who make the rules don't sell real estate for a living and don't quite understand all the little things that we encounter that may not be best for a seller.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean, all for the most part, I'm in favor of clear cooperation because I've seen it abused.
yeah,
That's not a situation where the situation where it was being abused. This poor man needed to have his home sold
yeah.
with some privacy and dignity.
And I think that, yeah, and I think that there's ways to do that within the regular apparatus that would
Yeah,
prevent it, like, no showing, showing by appointment only,
yeah,
um, things like that, that it doesn't necessarily have to be, even if it is on realtor.com for everybody in America to see, that there's still there can be some fences around how it's shown as long as every buyer knows there's something out there that they could offer on. The
yeah.
thing I remember now, the second thing I was going to say is that for all the people that complain about NAR and our local realtor board and everything in
Mhm,
between, you don't have to be a realtor to be a real estate agent. Like,
mhm,
you get a real estate in California, you can get a real estate license from the state, but
mhm,
passing classes and tests and all
mhm,
those requirements, you don't have to join the realtor board. You can
mhm,
be just an independent agent.
mhm.
But the reason why people don't do that is because the apparatus of the local MLS is a powerful tool that
Yep.
benefits the clients, buyers, and sellers. And
Yep.
so that's why people join it. And if you're going to join it, you need to follow the rules.
Yep.
So when you say you want to abolish the NAR, NAR is the backbone of how all these organizations operate with each
Yep.
other. And they
Yep.
decide the rules of the road so that we can all operate ethically with each other.
Yep.
And that, with the platitude name or whatever the word I'm looking for, not platitude, but the clear cooperation, just,
Yep.
we're supposed to play nicely with each other.
Yep.
It's competitive. We're going head to head with each other. I mean,
Yep.
when we represent our clients, we're actually negotiating for opposite. So we're not partners. We are adversaries. And so it's
Yep.
important that while we're adversaries, there's somebody calling balls and strikes to make sure that we do that in a ethical way. And the second side about that is that if we operate in an ethical way, in theory, it'll keep us out of court or out of
Yes.
mediation and arbitration, which is losing for everybody because of
Yep.
time and energy and money.
Yep. Adversaries with a fiduciary responsibility to your client, be it buyer or seller, and with hopefully a cloak of code of ethics overseeing everything and making sure that we are all nice to each other
Yeah.
while we still take care of our clients.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts about NAR, CAR, CCAR, NBA,
no, I chafe
ABA?
against it every so often. I am not a fan of how that lawsuit was handled, but it was probably the best way that it was handled. And CCAR, if we did not have CCAR, we would not have an MLS. We would not have somebody who was fixing our website. When all of a sudden Paragon goes down and we can't, put our listing on or, pull the information so that we can show houses. They work in the background. We should be very grateful to them for all they do for us. Otherwise, we would be digging through a book once a week and going out and previewing houses and calling our clients and saying, "Oh, I have some houses to show you." They've improved the way the whole operation works, and it has benefited, I think, everybody.
So, for those of you who don't have candles, lighting up your cave, those were the dark ages back before the internet.
Third snort.
You there it is, not even 9 o'clock, third snort. Um, you had to go down to the board and they'd have a book and they'd have, like the green bar paper with dot matrix
Dot
printers. And you
major.
had to try and read the data off of those sheets. And then when we made flyers, we'd type it out and then we'd glue a photo physically to the piece of paper and hand those out. And they were very valuable because you had to pay the cost of not just the photocopier, but the cost of that photo
Yes,
or color printers. And you're like, are you going to take that? That was the other thing. I learned never to take anything at a broker's tour because that was somebody's expense.
exactly.
Nowadays, it's like, here, just take my paper. It's no big deal.
So, in my defense, that was before my time, just barely before my time. But I never did have the book or have to make photos and glue them to a Xeroxed flyer.
Yeah,
I
all
missed
the all
that,
the
thank
joking
goodness.
about Sherry, when Sherry started, she was like the only agent in her office that had email because she had come from a real professional setting, not just like mom and pop. I couldn't get any other job. Like, no, she left a
Uh-huh.
very good job. She had all the business skills, so she was night and day above everybody else.
I had an email address and I had a digital camera, and the people in my office were like, wow, wow.
She also had a shoebox side cell phone, but that stayed with the company.
It's true.
All
All
right.
right, good. I
So
hope we've answered everybody's questions about NAR, CAR, and all those other acronyms out there.
yeah. All right. Well, if you've got any questions about governing bodies over real estate agents and what keeps us accountable other than our internal moorings, we'd be happy to share those with you. And thank you for putting up with what you don't realize is a late night recording for us. And we stayed up a little bit late, and Sherry showered you with her pleasant snorts.
Apologies in advance.
If this entertains you, be sure to like and subscribe and refer us to your clients. And hopefully next time we will not be so punchy. All
There
right.
was no alcohol involved here.
No, not yet. All right. Bye,
Bye
everybody.
bye, everybody.